There should be no assumption of child contact for recipients of allegations of domestic abuse, irrespective if these allegations are true or not. Morning team, it's me, your favourite, Jordan at the screen, and today I wish to talk to you about a report recently published by Women's Aid and CAFCASS titled Allegations of Domestic Abuse in Child Contact Cases. Anyone with any knowledge or history of involvement with either of these two organisations will know that this is quite a bad idea. And for those who do not understand why this is a terrible decision, allow me to link to another report published by Women's Aid, their Child First 19 Child Homicides, which attempted to argue that any man who is even simply accused of domestic violence is instantly a threat to the life of the child. The paper can be summated with the statement, if we say a man is an abuser, he wants to murder his children. It has since been thoroughly refuted by the 330 Child Homicides report, which is also linked in the script below. Their most recent report is sinister for two invidious reasons. One, their promulgation of the men are abusers, women are abused narrative, which they will try to use to influence government. And two, they have been supported by CAFCASS, and as they are state-funded, they are supposed to remain politically neutral. Their most publicised finding is that 62% of applications to the family court about where a child should live or spend time feature allegations of domestic abuse. Katie Ghosh, the newest chief executive, who has only been on the job for about 2 weeks, has used this statistic to say there should be no assumption of child contact for perpetrators of domestic abuse, because obviously an allegation is evidence enough. She also remarks that in 44% of contact applications where domestic abuse was alleged, contact was ordered at the first hearing, without either considering the validity of the allegation put forth or addressing the idea that perhaps allegations are made by the parent with child to prevent contact with the non-resident parent. Now, whilst this report may suggest there is a pandemic of a problem within the family courts, what with this deluge of allegations of domestic abuse, the purpose of the study was to look at the types of allegations present in family law court proceedings, including safeguarding concerns other than domestic abuse, and what happened with the proceedings. It did not seek to make findings on these allegations. Yes, you heard that right. They outright state that they did not bother to investigate whether these allegations are true or not. Because, hey, it's not like anyone would ever maliciously present a false allegation of domestic abuse when in a family court setting. I mean, why would anyone ever want to do that? Not only did they fail to investigate the validity of the allegations, they also allowed prevalence rates of abuse to be inflated through flimsy research practices. The survey considered 3 categories of domestic abuse: physical abuse, sexual abuse, and coercive control. The categories are not mutually exclusive, and data was collected from the following sources: allegations made by a parent, which was the majority of allegations, at 48.9%, local authority information, police information, this included records from the police national computer, convictions, cautions, reprimands, final warnings, and locally held police information, such as police call-outs. Medical evidence. Now, whilst this was included in the study, no allegations were made using medical evidence, so why the fuck they included it, I do not know. Exemption from a mediation information and assessment meeting, a MIA. Domestic Violence Perpetrator Program referral, which had 5 allegations in total. A finding of fact hearing ordered by the court, again, just another 5 allegations in total for that. And then a domestic abuse related order, for example, a non-molestation order. Data were collected on each record of domestic abuse present in the case file. This was collected separately for all 3 categories of abuse, which were physical, sexual, and coercive control, against the source of the record, such as police or local authority information. So let's run with this. Let's say someone makes an allegation such as sexual assault under threat of repercussion. This would satisfy all 3 initial categories. Let's then hypothesize the victim goes to their GP or to a hospital. They got injured in the process and want to get checked out. They are then referred to a refuge, and then the police are notified, who can themselves record it on multiple levels, as we just heard. Maybe the local authorities are informed as well. Now, this singular incident can now be recorded multiple times, and would thus count as numerous allegations according to the report, inflating the final number of allegations. In cases that featured allegations, the mean average was 3.3 allegations per case. This, however, does not impact their worrying finding that 62% of cases feature an allegation of domestic abuse. Their finding of 62% is over 10 times the size of the UK estimated domestic abuse prevalence rate of around 6%. The fact that multiple allegations can be made per incident means that the total number of allegations is inflated, but this does not explain why so many cases feature allegations. Either we are to believe that couples who require the family courts are also families who are at risk of or are more likely to have a history of domestic abuse, or the family courts elicit allegations of domestic abuse. I leave that dilemma to the audience. They also fail to note why the gender imbalance in domestic abuse allegations does not match real-life statistics. 1 in 3 victims of domestic abuse are men, yet the statistics found in the report do not match this. No explanation for this discrepancy is given. And I have a sneaky suspicion that this discrepancy will be seen for many forms of allegations, not that I'm in any way doubtful of this report. So, for total allegations, there was DA plus other allegations, 588. DA plus no other allegations, 16. No DA and other allegations, 75. And no DA plus no other allegations, obviously 0. You can't have any allegation that there's nothing to allege. So a total of 679 allegations. If we are to include other allegations, we find a mean average of 5.1 allegations per case that features an allegation. And so all the figures come from these tables. I also then include the 3 allegations against mothers and 13 allegations against fathers from the DA plus no other allegations found on page 14. These 2 tables that are up on the screen, they came from pages 12 and 13. So adding this all up together gives us this lovely little table. Now, I wonder, do these statistics match reality? For these upcoming reflections, I have tried to use official government statistics where possible. So when I say ONS, without specifically mentioning the survey it originates, the link to the survey can be found in the script, which will be in the description box below. So let's get started. Domestic abuse, as mentioned earlier, around 1 in 3 victims are male. The Women's Aid survey implies fathers, or men, are victims 24% of the time, whereas mothers, or women, are victims 76% of the time when DA is committed. The ONS says men are victims 36% of the time, whereas women are 64% of the victims. There is a noticeable difference here. Parental substance abuse. According to the ONS, in the year of 2016 to 17, 5.5% of women and 11.5% of men reported using drugs. Of all drug users, 32% and 68% respectively, assuming a 50-50 split of 2 genders in the population. The representation in the Women's Aid study is near enough accurate at 33% and 67% respectively. Parental mental health. According to the Adult Psychiatric Morbidity Survey of 2014, women are 1.57 times more likely than men to suffer from a common mental disorder, CMD. This includes things such as anxiety and depression, that sort of thing. 21.4% of women and 13.6% of men met the criteria such that primary care recognition is warranted. Of all who met this criteria, it was 61% and 39% respectively. Women's Aid found 51% and 49%. There is a noticeable difference. Child abuse, emotional. I have used the data currently presented by the ONS, and instead of using the term emotional, they use psychological. I shall work with the assumption that Women's Aid would agree with the ONS definition for psychological abuse to match their definition of emotional. At least I'm hoping they'll agree. Of all psychological abuse, mothers were perpetrators 40% of the time, whereas fathers were perpetrators 35% of the time, reducing stats to parents. Stats are 53% and 47% respectively. Women's Aid found 42% and 58% respectively. Noticeable difference. History of violence other than abuse. Now, I've assessed the nature of crime tables of violence from the ONS, and I've taken the mean average for non-domestic acquaintance and stranger violence in England and Wales for the year ending March 2016. That is the most recent data currently available, correct at the time of writing, and we find 4 perpetrators according to the ONS. Males were perpetrators 77% of the time, females 16% of the time, and both 7% of the time. Compare that for Women's Aid, we found males were perpetrators 70% of the time and females were perpetrators 30% of the time, and both was not recorded. There is again a difference here, but this is to be expected as we can assume it's influenced by the both category included in the ONS source. Child abuse. Physical. Now, using the same table from a moment ago, when it comes to physical abuse, mothers perpetrate 29% and fathers perpetrate 39%. Of total physical abuse perpetrated by parents, the results are 43% and 57% respectively. Women's Aid returned figures of 34% and 66% respectively. There is a bit of a difference. Child abuse, neglect. Statistics to show which parent, mother or father is perpetrating neglect and to what end seems to not exist in any substantial quantity or quality. Take this study by the NSPCC there, child abuse and neglect in the UK, which in this study like to boldly state that 93.8% of domestic abuse is perpetrated by men. How the fuck they expect us to consider that valid, I don't know. Also, they didn't exactly give adequate explanation for how they arrived at this statistic, yet couldn't tell us who's perpetrating neglect, mother or father. What's the name of that study again? Essentially, the point I'm trying to get at is trying to find statistics on which parents are perpetrating neglect is a bit of a ball ache. So I've been forced to resort to a very old study from America from 2005. So data has certainly passed its sell-by date, and it's American. But trying to find statistics on parents who perpetrate neglect, as I said, it's a pain in the dick. So if we extrapolate the data found in Figure 6, which can be seen here, we find 32,050 male perpetrators and 68,173 female perpetrators of neglect or medical neglect. Only 32% and 68% of all neglect, respectively. Women's Aid found 49% and 51% respectively. I remind readers these statistics I have used for this element are out of date and are American, so take it with a huge pinch of salt. Highly conflicted parents. A definition is not given here for what highly conflicted parents means. I'm to assume that it means parents who argue and fight a lot. People don't really enjoy being in the same room together, to put it lightly. And as this is quite a broad topic, and as I doubt there are really any legitimate statistics out there on who argues the most, I've decided to ignore this segment. It is a bit of a interesting one, difficult one. Implacable hostility. Better known as parental alienation, which CAFCASS has actually finally recognised, it is defined by unjustified or unwarranted rejection of a parent where there was previously a normal range, loving, good enough relationship. It features intentional or unintentional actions by a parent, usually the parent with child, to turn their child against the other parent, usually the non-resident parent. This study here, and unfortunately it is an American study, it found that in randomly selected population of adults in the USA, total being 610, 13.4% of parents have been alienated from one or more of their children, much higher than previous estimates. Findings show evidence of parental alienation across all socioeconomic and demographic indicators. 17% of fathers reported PA compared to 11% of mothers. Of all parents perpetrating PA, 55% were fathers and 45% were mothers. Women's Aid figures suggest 19% and 81% respectively. So there's a bit of a noticeable discrepancy between these statistics. Child abduction. Now, being the sort that I am, I would personally prefer to factor in the statistics found in implacable hostility, because I'm of the firm belief that any child whomst has been parentally alienated only first became such after having been prior abducted by the parent with child. I'm also of the firm belief that any parent who denies access to the non-resident parent is, during time of denial of access, performing the act of child abduction. That being said, I will only be using official figures to compare against. Alas, official figures are a bit lacking, as with neglect, they're just not there. One of the best resources that I could find was the Taken report by Action Against Abduction. Without getting too much into the different forms of child abduction, international parental child abduction, parental abduction from care, domestic disputes, etc., the report highlights how ascertaining valid statistics on child abduction is tough. The report says that Lowe 2011 reports that the vast majority of parental abductors, 70% globally, are mothers. In the UK, 40% of abductors are the primary carer, 30% the joint primary carer, and 30% the non-primary carer of the abducted child or children. Primary or joint primary carer mothers account for 2/3 of all abductors. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office report that many abductions occur during school holidays when a child is not returned following a visit to the parent's home country, so-called wrongful retentions. Now, assuming the 70% statistic to be true, we can compare it with what Women's Aid found, that 38% of allegations were against mothers and 63% were against fathers. I know, I fucking love rounded figures. Women's Aid found the inverse of the Taken report. Child abuse, sexual. According to the ONS, perpetrators of child sex abuse are most likely to be a friend or acquaintance, 30%, or other family member, 26%. For other types of sexual assault, the perpetrator was most likely to be a stranger at 42%. But breaking down these statistics, we find that if we take the average for both mother and father of the two categories, we find mothers perpetrated 1% and fathers perpetrated 5.5% of all child sex abuse. Of parents who committed child sex abuse, mothers were committing 15% and fathers were committing 85%. This closely matches the statistics found by Women's Aid. Child exploitation. For this element, I looked into what it is they asked for in the study for this, because child exploitation is a bit of a broad topic, and they were looking specifically for radicalisation, CSE, trafficking, and FGM. I gotta say though, I am a little pissed that MGM is not included, but this is Women's Aid and they don't give a shit about boys. As radicalisation, CSE, trafficking, and GM are considerably varied topics that will elicit very different statistics, it will be improper to compare them with Women's Aid stats. This section is intentionally left blank. Also, there were only 3 allegations, so it's pretty much pointless. Parental learning difficulties. Well, this is a broad fucking topic, and there was only 1 allegation each way, so I've opted to leave this section out. Total. I've compiled my statistics together and put them into the original table, and have colour-coded them for accuracy. Statistics that were 3 percentage points within official stats are marked green. Stats that were between 4 and 10 are marked amber, and those that are 11 percentage points or more out are marked as red. Now this is in both directions, so double it to get the catchment window. Those that have no stats are unmarked. Women's Aid, on the statistics that I have information for, were correct within 10 percentage points on 5 out of 10 categories. That's 50%. Women's Aid, you haven't failed this module. Well done. Although, it does massively throw into doubt your general theme of men who are alleged to have perpetrated domestic abuse are a threat, especially as most of your statistics are off the mark. But for that table, I was quite lenient and used a 10 percentage point leeway both ways, so 20% catchment window. So let's review the table again, but let's halve the margin of error, so it's 5 percentage points each way, giving a 10 percentage point catchment window. And oh fuck, look at that. 80% failure rate. Brilliant. The only 2 that were correct, or within a decent margin, was a parental substance abuse and child abuse sexual. Let's analyse another one of their statistics in a little more detail. On page 8 they say, When post-separation abuse was alleged, this was sometimes new, that is, no abuse was alleged prior to the separation, or sometimes a continuation of the abuse that had taken place before the separation. In our discussions, Women's Aid highlighted their experience, backed up by their femicide census report, of the post-separation period being a dangerous time for victims. Now this little tidbit here seems quite delicious, so let's unpack it. First, the femicide report states the post-separation period being a dangerous time for victims. Oh, that sounds fucking terrifying. How dangerous is it? Well, let's read it. The Femicide Census Report has found that between 2009 and 2015, 936 women have been killed by men. 598, 64%, were killed by their current or former partners. 75, or 8%, of the women were killed by their sons. Most women who are killed by a man known to them. 598 women were killed by men identified as current or former partners. Way to go with repetition. Women are at significant risk at the point of separation from an abusive partner. 76% of women killed by their ex-partner or ex-spouse were killed within the first year that followed their separation. So 76% of 598 women killed by a former or current partner over a 6-year period were murdered in the first year after separation. So let's bust the maths, which is 0.76 times 598 all over 6, and we get approximately 76 women a year. That's 1 every 115 hours, 1 every 5 days or so. So let's reread that quote from the original report. Was it the post-separation period being a dangerous time for victims? 1 every 5 days. 76 women a year die at the hands of a former partner or current partner less than 1 year after splitting from him. So how many breakups are happening? Well, according to the ONS, there were 101,055 divorces of opposite-sex couples in 2015. So just divorces, not including breakups, where they were just dating and, they split up. So the final rate will be greater, and this is older data, 2015. But that gives us a total of 101,055 women, assuming there's no change in trend since 2015. 76 out of those 101,055 will be murdered by a current or former partner in the first year of breakup, giving us a death rate of 0.075%. I wish to state again that that's only for married couples who are divorcing. It does not include non-marital breakups. You are more likely to die from an avoidable neoplasm than you are to die from a former or current partner in the first year post-breakup. In fact, you are over 2 times more likely to die from ischemic heart disease. To put it into perspective. So 0.075% of breakups result in the woman being murdered by the current or former partner. This death rate is supposed to be on such a scale that, as they said, the post-separation period being a dangerous time for victims. Yeah, sure, 1 in 1,330 is such a massive rate. 0.075% are at risk is a funny way of saying that 99.925% aren't. You might as well take all the ginger people you deal with, 4% of the English population is redhead, remove 98.5% of them, and that total number of people you are left with is the total number of women who are going to be at risk. That should hopefully put it into a bit more perspective for you. Actually, do you know what? Fuck it, let's do that. You say there were 15,160 eligible cases from the time period of April 2015 to March 2016. Well, let's just assume it's 1 man, 1 woman per case, giving us, naturally, 15,160 women. 0.075% of those women will be at risk of being murdered by her current or former partner during the first year after breakup. So 15,160 multiplied by 0.075 over 100 equals 11.37 women a year. And that's about 1 a month. Now that might sound like a lot, but there are about, 14 to 1,500 eligible cases every month, that fit the criteria for this study. But I wonder, how many men kill themselves every month because they are being denied access to their children? Now, how would that statistic stack up against this dangerous time for victims? Another issue with their methodology is the validity of the source material, which is pronounced when the report states that the data is dependent upon the recording within the CAFCASS case files only, which are not the same in content as the full bundle of papers available at the court hearing. Therefore, the entirety of the data and subsequent results are predicated upon the interpretations of the CAFCASS officers who wrote the original 216 case files used in this report, rather than, relying on the official court files. Ergo, what could be recorded by the CAFCASS officer as an allegation of domestic abuse made by, be it the mother or the father, could be nothing more than the CAFCASS officer misinterpreting what the parent is actually saying. Not that they would ever do that, surely not. But this leads me to a position where I cannot trust a single case file used in this report, as they are open to the subjective interpretations of the CAFCASS officer. In fact, CAFCASS has actually been called out by Parliament for their lack of readiness and continued failure to get to grips with the fundamental weaknesses in its culture, management and performance. It has been declared as an organisation not fit for purpose, with low compliance by staff with important requirements, and has been a persistent problem and has undermined CAFCASS's efforts to improve performance. I will trust this CAFCASS report just about as far as I can throw it, which would not be very far and would actually result in a horrible mess on the floor, what of it being 30 pages of ideologically driven bile. I recommend my dear audience trawls through the links for those comments. They are certainly very eye-opening about how it is our government views this government body, seeing as it's state-funded. Really gives a inside view of CAFCASS's ability to perform, or more correctly, their lack of ability to perform. Another worrying finding was that of cases where allegations did not feature, only 48% were given orders of unsupervised contact at the final hearing. The fact that this number is so low is shocking. Why are so many fathers being denied unsupervised contact with their children when there are no allegations being made? What possible motive could the courts find to keep a perfectly ordinary father out of the life of his child or children? And so now I almost feel compelled to remark on the consistency in this report with their agenda, because it seems almost lost when we assess, or when they assess, some of the case examples, such as this one. The children disclosed to the local authority that the mother was physically abusive towards them, and older children did not want contact. The children received counselling during proceedings, and there was scope for future mediation to support contact with the mother. Yet, if we are to work on the basis that there should be no assumption of child contact for perpetrators of domestic abuse, why in the fuck are you pushing for contact with the mother? Not only was the mother violent in a domestic setting, she was violent towards the children. Yeah, you're not exactly standing by your guns here, are you? And it's not just their flimsy methodology and questionable results that irk me. No, but the way they are weaponising such skewed information to further imbalance the family courts. In the same blog post that I found the Katie Ghosh comment, Women's Aid states that in far too many cases, fathers who have perpetrated domestic abuse against their child's mother are getting the benefit of the doubt when it comes to deciding who should have contact. They are pushing the narrative that as soon as a father is accused, he should be denied basic due process. An utterance of an allegation should be worth the weight of a banging gavel, it would seem. They also state in the report that contact taking place before proceedings and consent may not always equate to an agreement about contact and may instead be indicative of a context of coercion or fear. That's right, a mother would never, ever, in God's name, want to choose to allow her children to spend time with their father. I mean, she's only doing so because she's being controlled by him. He's coercing her and controlling her. He's got his claws deep in her. Yes, women, they don't have any agency, do they? They just can't think to themselves, hey, maybe there should be two parents involved in the children's life. Why the fuck would they want that? But to be fair on Women's Aid, at least they're maintaining their consistency here. I mean, these are the same people who say fathers are not allowed to cross-examine when in the courtroom because men use it to continue their abuse. It's now been brought into legislation. A spokeswoman from CAFCASS has responded to the criticisms levied against the report, and to curtly summate or paraphrase her, "We hear your criticisms, but we've spoken with men's groups before, so fuck off." I'm sure CAFCASS has all our best interests at heart. I mean, it's not like they're hugely incompetent or anything. And so, my concluding thoughts of the study and post-report review of the press. As per most work from Women's Aid, this study is not worth the paper it is printed on. At least not for their ends. For me, it only helps to prove, yet again, how inadequate and obsolete and biased Women's Aid is. In fact, the fact that they are pushing such overwhelmingly outrageous statistics shows just exactly how out of touch they are. And everyday Joe public is going to realise this. Because they know that 62% of families aren't abusive. Because guess what? They have friends, they have families that they know. Because if 62% of cases, or even families, did feature domestic abuse, I'm pretty fucking sure they'll see it. They argue that domestic abuse is alleged in 62% of cases, yet expend absolutely no fucking effort in ascertaining proof, because they know that if they did a finding of fact, that the facts would not swing in their favour. Please see their table that I marked earlier in the video. And they don't really have any recommendations at the end of their report, just a bunch of, conclusions. But Women's Aid did put up that post on their blog, like I've mentioned a few times, the day or so after releasing the report, and on it was that quote used at the beginning of the video, where Katie Ghosh said there should be no assumption of child contact for perpetrators of domestic abuse. And I assume this is where they want to push their recommendations, so let's actually read some of the paragraphs in that blog post. Who gets the benefit of the doubt when it comes to deciding whether a child should have contact with both parents? When faced with that question, I don't think many people would answer, a father who has perpetrated domestic abuse against a child's mother. Yet, the most worrying finding of today's research by CAFCASS, in partnership with Women's Aid, is that in many cases, that's exactly what is happening. Jesus, you are stupid! You are stupid! Firstly, you're presenting a false dilemma. Why should there be a choice between mother and father? Why should there be benefit of the doubt? Why the fuck would there be allegations of domestic abuse? You're just blowing shit out your ass. It's ridiculous. And I must ask, did you not read your own report? You're saying that they're perpetrating all this domestic abuse, yet you didn't actually look into whether they're perpetrating or not. You're looking into whether it was alleged or not, and what impact the allegations had on the family. I've not actually looked into the impact too much on the children. That's what your report was about, though. Not about the perpetration of domestic abuse, but about the accusations, the allegations made. So, what? And I know you've only been on the job, Katie, for about 2 weeks, but fuck, are you slacking off already? I mean, come on. You gave such a great speech at the UKIP conference back in September 2015. And I'm actually being serious here. It was a really, really good speech. So well done on that one. The speech where you refer to UKIP receiving just one MP, the whole general election malarkey thing. What did you call it? You said it was a, why am I looking up here when the script is down there? You called it a national scandal. We know the figures. How have you fallen so low? How? And you went from knowing the figures when it was UKIP related to now not knowing the figures when it's Women's Aid related. Did you take more pride in your work when you were investigating for UKIP than you're going to take pride now that you're investigating for Women's Aid? Do you hold UKIP to be higher than Women's Aid? Because I'd like to think you do, because that would be fucking hilarious. I mean, I could keep quoting that UKIP video, like the bit where you refer to Douglas Carswell as an outstanding MP, but I shall let the viewers enjoy it for themselves. Honestly, peeps, do watch it. It's great. That's the woman who's now the new chief executive of Women's Aid. I know, how times have fucking changed. But there's no more recommendations at the end of that blog post. There's nothing more to draw from that report that I wish to talk about today. You're just essentially using this report to say that men are evil and we need to do something about it, even though we can't prove they're evil, which is why we've decided to stop using evidence, because we realise evidence is, not in our favour. Like with your 19-child homicides report, how that got, had a massive shit done on it. So you've realised evidence doesn't swing your way. You can't fabricate and, contort it. You can't corrupt it. You can't present a biased agenda anymore. You have to ignore evidence whatsoever and just jump to allegations. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work out in your favour either. But maybe I'm just counting my chickens before the eggs have hatched. Who knows? But that's been my video for today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Toodle pip!